I'm Pamela Cuccinell. This is Increased Success in Business and Life through the Lunar Cycle. And I thought I'd begin my free webinars with talking about the lunar cycle because to me it's one of the most trackable and obvious things that happens. And I'm going to show you a way you can use it yourself to have greater success in your day-to-day launches, figuring out planning, what you may want to do, events. All these things are affected by where the moon is in the sky. For instance, tonight the moon is in the sign of Gemini, and it is well aspected. As we astrologers say, the moon is waning. Usually in the waning moon, we don't begin something new, but other than this is the first time I've done this on Zoom, this is not the first time I've done a discussion like this in front of people. So it is something that I really like to do. Not everybody perhaps would want the moon in Gemini when they began something, because as an individual, it also matters what sign something is in, if you resonate with that or not. So there are things you can know about astrology that can be really helpful, but you also know if Gemini, you are a Gemini, your sun sign is in Gemini, or your rising sign is Gemini, your moon sign is in Gemini, then today is a good day for you as far as expressing how you feel about something, wanting to be heard, and enjoying communication. For some people, it can feel like things are moving too fast. Conversations go this way and that way. It all depends on what makes you feel like you're in the groove of things you like to do. So to begin, this is an astrology calendar. This is my favorite. It's called Celestial Influences. Comes out every year. It's Jim Maynard. You can get it on Amazon. There's also a little booklet, or you can just look at where the moon is online. There's different calendars that will tell you where the moon is. The basic things that are going to matter from this discussion is, where is the moon in the sky today? What is it doing? And yeah, we'll talk a little about the signs, but the main focus is, what is the phase of the moon? And this is why. Because probably from the earliest point in time, the moon cycle was something that people were paying attention to. And they were paying attention to it because they would notice when the sky got dark, you could see more stars, but there was no moonlight. When the moon got big, it was easier to do things like hunt or things that needed to happen at night. So the ancients became very linked to following and tracking the moon. What's interesting is now we live in a world 24/7 where we decide when it's light, when it's dark. You can have curtains that black out all light and you can sleep in the day. You can have lights on all night and be a night owl. So you can really kind of mess up your natural circadian rhythm as far as that goes. But when you pay attention to where the moon is in the phase of the moon, regardless of the luxury of technology, where, yeah, it's nice to have lights on at night so I can read. But regardless of that, if you pay attention to the phase of the moon, then you can decide, this is a good day to do this. This is a better day to wait for a couple of days and do it later next week. And you can see why it's going to roll out in a way that's effective for you. And I'll explain that more in a second. But if you think about the fact that we are geocentric, that means we know that the sun is the center of the solar system, but we are geocentric, where this is our Earth. Everything we really care about happens here. And then more specifically, as you laser down, everything we really care about happens right here in the individual's family, friends, pets, out, 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 out. And that's how we see the world. So if we look at the moon and realize that our planet would be radically different without this symbiotic relationship, because the moon, through her orbit around the Earth, has created a rhythmic tide. So our marine animals, everything that happened on our Earth grew and blossomed due to the fact that there's this rhythmic cycle that occurs because of our relationship with the moon. If we didn't have the moon, we'd be spinning in this kind of erratic wobble. High tide would happen at noon every time. And honestly, the creatures on the planet probably wouldn't have evolved to where we are today, because a lot of the whole evolution cycle happened through this rhythmic movement of the tides, of the moon, and her cycles. So here's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to educate people a little more about the moon, because a lot of us have forgotten. Every now and then the internet starts buzzing about supermoon. Well, supermoon is a phrase that means the moon is in perigee. It's close to the Earth. And so if it's a full moon, it's going to be a really big, beautiful moon. But I'll see supermoon on the internet when it's a new moon, but they'll still put a picture of the full moon, which means people don't realize that the moon is a very regular cycle. So let me explain it. A lot of you may know, may be very obvious to you, but it will make your life, if you start to pay attention to it, it will make your life flow with a habitual pattern that makes more sense, because you're not a salmon fighting your way upstream, you're going with the flow. The Farmer's Almanac is a publication that refers to where the moon is, and organic farmers use it in the same way when Poor Richard's Almanac, Ben Franklin, was generating his almanac. He also, Ben Franklin, was an astrologer. Yes, he was an astronomer. At the time, those two were not as uncomfortable as they are today. What's interesting about the astrologer thing is, if I'm at a party and somebody asks me what I do and I say I'm an astrologer, and then they start telling me how excited they were to read about the new black hole or the new planet that was discovered, I'll say, no, I'm an astrologer. I do look at astronomy, but I'm an astrologer. And that person sometimes will just decide, okay, I don't really want to talk to her anymore, because they were excited by astronomy, science. If Neil deGrasse is at a party and someone starts telling him about how they're a Gemini or a Pisces, he's insulted because he's an astronomer, which is why astronomers, I think, have such an uncomfortable relationship with us. It doesn't bother me when someone calls me an astronomer, even though that's not what I am. But I think it really used to bother Carl Sagan. But here we go with this lunar calendar. So I'm going to begin talking about the dark of the moon. And I'm going to begin there because usually when people talk about the lunar cycles, they begin at the new moon. But I'm going to talk about the dark of the moon, which happens before the new moon actually happens. It's also called the balsamic moon. It's a point when the sky is very dark and we are approaching when the new moon is exact. Now, you wouldn't necessarily know that the new moon hadn't happened unless, of course, you were looking at a lunar calendar. But when you're in this dark of moon phase, it's a wonderful period to really get into what is it that you want to release and shelve before you enter the next lunar cycle. And what is it you want to concentrate on for the new moon? Because here's what the new moon does. The new moon is like a birth. Creative energy has just entered the world and is ready to be taken care of. So it's very tender, it's very raw. And if we enter a new moon cycle and we're not clear what it is we want to focus on, what we want to bring about, what we want to make happen, then we're not really utilizing that birth energy in the way we can. So when I think of the dark of moon period, I think of it as Hecate's time. And Hecate is one of the oldest goddesses. You may be familiar with her in that when the patriarchy came in, they made her very old and decrepit and crone-like. And she was almost to be feared, this old crone energy. But Hecate was a very powerful goddess in that she is the midwife of birth and of death. So when she stands there at dark of moon period, and any one of us who have been in life long enough to know that when something ends, it also creates void for something new to begin. So if you've had a heartbreak or loss of a job or something that was taken away or graduated from, you know that there's an empty period, but then you're walking into a time of expectation and what's happening next. That's when the real creative spark can happen because we have space for it. So when we're in the dark of moon period, we are creating space for the birth, for the new beginning. And as soon as the new moon happens, that energy's entered the world. So when the new moon is also an eclipse, it's very volatile energy. And I'm not going to talk a lot about an eclipse right now. That's something I've talked about before, but we're just talking about the basic moon cycle. So if it also is a new moon and an eclipse, solar eclipse, then you don't really want to launch or begin something right that day of the new moon because it's so volatile. It's so energetically active. And the new moon energy it lasts for 24, 36, 48 hours even. And that's when we're in this nice space of about 3.5 days where we can really get behind what is it we're bringing in? What's the new thing? And the more aware you are of your new moon cycle, the more you can make things happen with it. Now, I do a new moon gathering every month and do an altar, a focus on it. And whether you have time to do that or you're just thinking about it, it's great, I always say, to write down 3 things you want to make happen in this lunar cycle, which will be 28 days. So one of the things should be something you can get off your desk and get done very quickly, because it's always very satisfying to accomplish something fast if you can do that. So choose the first thing on your list to be something that you want to move beyond and get done. And then the next thing is a little more of a reach, but something you want to do in the next couple of weeks. It might be call someone, it may be start a project, it can be anything really, but it's something you really want to pay attention to. And then the third thing might be something that's been a project for a while or something you want to revisit and just give attention to. Put that on the list too. even if it's a long range thing, but it's great every month to just say, yes, I am going to Paris, or yes, I am going to write that book. It's a nice thing to just give some new moon thoughts to. And then there's also other things you can do. Sometimes we say, write 10 wishes, things that you just would like to have happen, world peace, my gardenia bloom, whatever it is you want to put. Because there's magic in the number 13, especially with the lunar cycle, because there's actually 13 lunar months in a year. So 10 wishes, 3 things that intentions that you want to make happen. At the very least, the 3 intentions are good to do. So you've got that powered up with your new moon energy, and now it's time to bring it out there, let it happen. And as you do that over the next few days, it's what we call the waxing moon cycle. What's happening with the waxing moon cycle is that the moon is starting to get bigger from our perspective as it becomes full. So when it's getting bigger, we're in a real energetic surge to make something happen. So after the first 3.5 days, then we're in the crescent moon cycle. You start to see that little lovely thumbnail moon. And as that happens, the energy becomes emerging. You can really start to see it. You can taste it. It's looking real. It still needs to be taken care of, but it's moving. The first quarter moon occurs when we call it a half moon. When the half moon occurs in the waxing cycle, then we're in crisis in action. It's a time when you kind of hope change, you take risks, and there can be growing pains. And as it continues to grow, becomes bigger, not quite full, we're really expanding and we're really testing. So what happens when the moon is full? When the moon is full, classically we talk about it's a time of culmination. So that's when you want to do that extra push at the gibbous cycle, where you really want to get things to a text, get your teeth in something. Because once the full moon occurs, it doesn't mean that the project's over. It just means that it's time to really integrate. And what I like to look at when it's integration time, when it's the full moon, is, and we'll talk a little about this very briefly at the end of the call, is the moon is getting lit by the sun, and it's full on. It's a beautiful disk in the sky. So whatever that full moon is in, like just last week, the full moon was in the sign of Pisces, because at this point of the call, the sun is in the sign of Virgo. So the sun in Virgo is lighting up that Pisces full moon. So that's the integration piece, because the sun is in the opposite sign of the moon. And I always think of the 12 signs as really 6 polarities, because it's not, that's why it's always amusing when someone says, for instance, a Taurus will say, oh, I can't stand Scorpios, because Scorpio is the opposite sign of Taurus. And so we're always learning from what we consider the opposite. And at the full moon, we have an opportunity to integrate the energies. So the full moon, the moon is being informed by the energy of the sun, lit by it. And it's actually an integration, because whatever the energy of the sun, self-expression, is saying, this is what I know, the moon is shining and saying, but this is what's happening emotionally. Because the reason why it's important to focus on where the moon is in the sky is because the moon is about the emotional weather. As I'm making this call, the moon is in the sign of Gemini. So that may feel like comfortable energy to you, or it may not, depending on how comfortable you are with someone who needs to look for information or explore an emotional terrain through conversation. Not everybody's hardwired to do that. Some people prefer a more meditative way of figuring out what's going on emotionally. Some people are very, do it all very feeling and very sensitive and don't really like to talk about it. So that's why it's also important to know who you are, not just the emotional weather. So every full moon is not the same. It's going to look 12 different ways depending on what sun sign is lighting that moon. Regardless, it's a point when full moons carry a lot of energy. When Hurricane Sandy came through, scientists, weather people were warning because the full moon creates bigger swells. And so when you have a hurricane or a storm where the moon is full, it's going to be bigger. And the same happens with any kind of emotional situation. If certain things are going on, it's going to be bigger when the moon is full. So we look at where the moon is when we're planning things like weddings or surgery or things that are very affected by high, big emotions. And you also want to integrate it with the individual as well. So everyone on the call, everyone who's listening to this was born with the moon in a certain phase. If you're born at a full moon, it's energetically different than someone who's born in a new moon. If you're born at the quarter moon, first quarter moon, energetically different than someone who's born at the dark of the moon. And so when you're in a phase that's mirroring your actual energetic thrust, you're going to feel more in your groove. And we look at that also for fertility for a woman. When is she most fertile? It's not cookie cutter. It's based on what her personal moon is and what's going in the sky. So once the moon is full, then the moon starts to wane. It starts to get smaller from our perspective. And if a waxing moon cycle is a great time to push and put things out there energetically and move things ahead, waning moon cycle is better about how do I wrap it up? What am I going to discard right now? Because I'm not going to get to it this lunar cycle clearly, and it's going to weigh me down with this other stuff that I really want to finish up. So in a waning moon cycle, where we're looking at what do we still want to accomplish and what's really the best course of action. When it's disseminating, so it's still kind of fat, but it's getting smaller, that's when we're spreading our message, throwing out the seeds, everything that we got from this culmination, this real high, this integration, this satisfied piece of what did I learn in this cycle, then we're spreading that wealth. At the third quarter moon, which is another half moon from our perspective, we're a crisis in consciousness. Maybe things didn't work out exactly as we had planned. We're at a crossroads. We've got to make decisions. What are we going to wrap up with? What are we going to... I don't usually like the word discard. I mean, for me, a lot of this feels more like recycling. What did I learn from that experience? Yeah, it may not fit in my life, whatever it was, or the relationship or the job, but how do I take what I learned from that and use it in a way that moves me forward or gives me something emotionally satisfying. So we're making decisions, because what's happening is we're about to enter another dark of moon, the balsamic cycle, when we are deciding once again what we're going to do at the next lunar cycle. So these 28 days, when you're moving through something, can be really, really effective at actualizing a goal, moving in ways that make sense for you, and what also may not be a fit going forward. And every new moon gives us a new opportunity to see, where am I at? What do I need to reevaluate? And how am I doing on this whole, I see it as a spiral of consciousness evolution. So it's not like we're going around something the same every time, because as that moon is moving, the planets are moving. Nothing is the same. Nothing's ever the same. There is constancy in how this cycle moves, the lunar cycle. Moon, her relationship to other planets is always different every month, every year. And what we can do is, by paying attention to how it moves in your life, and as you start to look at it, you'll start to see what works for you. Because, as I said, depending on your personal lunar phase at birth, certain times are going to feel very, very, very personal to you, very red hot. Might be inward if you're a balsamic moon person. It depends on who you are. And when you know where the moon is, you can kind of clock the emotional weather a lot more consistently than being caught by surprise by something because of where things were. If you're born at a full moon, you're going to see the sun is 180 degrees from the moon. So you're going to look at a circle and you'll see the glyph for the sun 180 degrees from the moon. If it's a new moon, the sun is here and the moon is right next to it. So it's very geometric. That's exactly what it is, because the horoscope flattens everything out to a 360-degree wheel. And we look at the phases of the moon pretty graphically, because it is important to know what phase of moon you were born. And you're going to need birth time, date of birth, and place you were born. If you don't have the time of birth, on my website, there's a place to find out how to get the time of birth. I have had clients who can't get it. They were born in China or on an island where they'd go in and fill out the birth certificate a couple of days after they came off the farm. So there are instances when birth time cannot be found. So signs, I'm going to quickly talk about signs. Aries, when the new moon is in Aries, it's a great time to really just run it out of the park. So whatever it is you want to begin quickly, make happen fast. A new car, that's always good with the Aries new moon. Anything that is exercise related, movement related, that's great with Aries. Taurus is really good new moon to do something on your home, do something that's about something you want to build that's substantial, concrete. Now, when I say this, you can do anything on a new moon. You can begin any project. So when I say the new moon in Gemini is great for some kind of communication, a neighbor, that's certainly true, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't decide you're buying a boat or, or doing something that's not typical of Gemini. The signs, when the new moon is coupled with the sign and you're doing something in that theme, then it expands the energy. It just makes it more powerful. Cancer is a wonderful new moon for beginning anything that's got to do with family, anything that's got to do with real estate, garden. Leo, anything that's got to do with creativity, romance, children, taking some kind of wonderful risk. Virgo, beautiful for a healthcare plan, for diet, for something that creating a new routine. Wonderful for that. Becoming organized, perfect for that. Doing a volunteer or service, or bringing into your home a new pet. That's great for Virgo. Libra, what's a relationship that you want to work on more effectively? What's a legal thing you want to explore? What's something that you need to find a sense of justice in? Scorpio, what's something you want to invest in more effectively, or invest something with? What's a puzzle you want to figure out, a mystery you want to figure out? Research into your past. My husband loves that family tree archive thing. That's great for Scorpio. Any kind of mystery that wants to be solved. Sagittarius, what do you want to learn? Where do you want to go? It's wonderful for travel and for education. Capricorn, very work related. Are you getting to the place you want to be in your personal achievement? Is that happening for you? Aquarius, network, new groups. Are your hopes and wishes really in line with what you believe you can achieve? If not, why not? Why not shoot for the moon, literally? Pisces, great time, Pisces new moon for finding your spiritual center and really looking at what you need to draw on your own personal well. Water signs, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces are really great for knowing who you are emotionally, really remembering something, the past. Air signs, Gemini, Libra, Aquarius, really great for some kind of mental exploration, something you want to think about differently. And earth signs, Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo, great for in the body, actual physical, something you want to concretize. And fire signs, Leo, Aries, and Sagittarius. What inspires you? If you want to know something more specific to your personal astrology, you can always contact me. We can always talk about doing an individual session, phone or in person, depending on where you are on the planet. There are 2 programs I'm going to be kicking off in another month or so. Well, actually one already exists, but the other one I'll be kicking off, and I'm not really going to talk about it now, but it is related to working something that's a goal that you want to make happen within 6 weeks and really getting it to a point where you feel like it's got some real legs to it, maybe even realize it. So that would be working within a group as well as with my personal support. And then the other program is ongoing for people who want real, intimate advice on business, personal goal, whatever it is. I've helped people with various projects that they want to make sure are timed right, so that they aren't basically banging their head against the wall. I mean, sometimes it's wonderful to just know that nothing's going to get done today. So take a walk, go to the aquarium, do something that really just feeds your soul. Sometimes we have days where we feel like we're just spinning our wheels, and that's not living your ultimate design. That's not doing what really fills your heart and makes you effective here in the world. So astrology is fabulous for helping a person understand what makes life bloom, what can help me realize my goals, my intentions, and dreams. And how can I be content or peaceful or present with where I am right now instead of feeling like it's not quite fitting the way I need it to be. Well, sometimes it doesn't fit that way because it doesn't fit that way. When the moon is new, we can't make it suddenly full. It's we are where we are at a certain point in time, and knowing that can give you such a joy and presence with where you are in this moment. And it's really very beautiful. So my my goal in talking to people about the magic of the celestial movement is to remind you of where you are now, where you are today, where you are at this moment. And depending on where you are on the planet, look at that moon, see where she is, see how she resonates with you. And if you're feeling a sense of, do I want to begin something new? And if I do, well, now I realize I'm in the waning moon cycle. Maybe this is a good time for me to just prepare, to think in terms of how can I make it the most effective I can, so that then when you're in that new moon cycle, you're ready. You're there's gas in the car and you're ready to go. It's much easier than pushing the rock up the hill. You're welcome to email or Facebook and let me know how the lunar cycle's happening for you, if it's made a difference to pay attention to it.